Without further ado, I am so thrilled to introduce our first guest author of the evening. Jas Hammonds was raised in many cities and in between the pages of many books. They have received support for their writing from Lambda Literary, Sundress Academy of the Arts, and the Highlights Foundation. They are also a grateful recipient of a McDowell James Baldwin Fellowship. We Deserve Monuments is their debut novel. Jas, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Morgan, for that intro. It always sounds so much fancier than I actually feel. So, my name is Jas Hammonds. My pronouns are they and she, and I am currently on Muncie Lenape land, also known as the Catskills. I'm on vacation with my partner and my dog. So, if you hear any ear flaps or jingles from a collar, that's just my dog in the background. I always call myself a reader first and a writer second. So I just want to acknowledge the importance that bloggers play in the bookish community. I know that, it's really important for readers to have a place outside of the mainstream outlets where they can go to get recommendations that are reader approved and loved. And as somebody who is trying to start their own blog, it's so intimidating. So I just have so much respect for all the bloggers and everything that you all do. Um, I want to talk about my debut novel, We Deserve Monuments. It's coming out in a little over 3 months now. It's a YA contemporary novel about a young girl named Avery. She's 17 and she is uprooted her senior year of high school and forced down into the home of her terminally ill grandmother, Mama Letty. And immediately upon arrival, there's some serious tension between her mom and Mama Letty. And I always jokingly call We Deserve Monuments like Gilmore Girls, but blacker and gayer, simply because the relationship between Avery as the daughter and her mother and grandmother, that's pretty much the beating heart of this novel. Um, Avery wants to make a decision whether she should pursue the history behind her family and uncover like what caused this friction, what caused these calluses within my family, or because Mama Letty is terminally ill, she just has to kind of make that decision of like, or should I just let it go and just kind of let bygones be bygones because we have a ticking clock here. This book is perfect for fans of family secrets, small town drama. It's set in a small town in Georgia, as well as queer love, in particular queer Black love. I The book has been comped to like The Black Kids by Christina Hammonds Reed, but also Leah Johnson books because there is a lot of drama and a lot of hard conversations about intergenerational trauma and race, but there's also tender, sweet first romance, girl next door vibes, crushy feelings. So we got a lot going on in there. My mentor, one of my mentors said, debut authors try to fit everything into their first book because you just don't know if you're going to have the chance again to write anything else. And so there's definitely a lot of moving parts in the novel. We had a slow burn murder mystery, first love, as well as family drama. But at the heart of it is about a girl and her relationship with her family and uncovering some uncomfortable truths about them. Just a quick note about me. I come from a military family, and so I moved around a lot when I was a kid. I wasn't in a location for more than 2 or 3 years. So from a young age, I was really obsessed with the idea of home and what that means to have a place on a map where you can point to and say, oh, this is where I'm from. And because I just never had that. Um, and I wanted to write about a girl who did have that, and then it's all uprooted when she, loses it and loses the comfort of home and her friends, especially at a time like senior year when everything feels so immediate and so pressing. So Avery's facing a lot in the novel, and I ultimately just wanted to write a story that is, a love letter to queer Black youth, queer biracial kids, Black families, just because this world is harsh. And I think that we need some tenderness in these moments and as well as, tenderness within our communities. So We Deserve Monuments is coming out in November 29th. Not that anybody's counting, but I think that's like 110 days from now. And I would be really, really appreciative if you would pick it up or tell a friend. Again, I love bloggers. So many of the excitement that I've experienced so far in this journey has been from bloggers reaching out, telling me that they really resonated with the book early. So again, thank you all so much for having me. I hope you have a great time tonight. And thank you to Macmillan for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Jas. That was amazing. And yes, as a reminder, November 29th, everyone mark your calendars because you're going to want to read this book. So next up, we have our second guest author of the night, Nick Brooks. Nick is an author and award-winning filmmaker from Washington, D.C. He is a 2020 graduate of USC's TV and film production program. His short film, Hoop Dreamin', earned him the George Lucas Scholar Award and was a finalist in the Forbes 30 Under 30 Film Fest. He is currently in development for his first feature film, We Were Born Kings, with Mandalay Pictures. Before becoming a filmmaker, Nick was an educator working with at-risk youth, and many of his stories are colored by his experiences with the children and families of his community. He is the author of Nothing Interesting Ever Happens to Ethan Fairmont, and of course, Promise Boys. And you can follow Nick on social media. I think Tatiana will be dropping that in the chats to make it easy for everyone. And with that, Nick, the floor is yours.
Yo, thank you, Morgan. You have to introduce me all the time everywhere I go. I really appreciate that. Thank you all for being here. Again, Macmillan, thank you for having me. This is a great opportunity. Really excited to meet this community and, just excited to tap in. As Morgan mentioned, I'm the author of Promise Boys, and I'm so excited to present to you what I call a small piece of my heart. My entire life, I've been a storyteller. I spent many of my formative years creating my own worlds because I was too afraid of the one that I lived in. And it wasn't until I became a school teacher that it dawned on me just how afraid so many Black and brown boys in my community are. And at that moment is when I made a commitment to tell their stories, and Promise Boys is really an ode to them. So, as an educator, I routinely saw Black and brown kids stripped of their identity, stripped of their autonomy, and even, probably most frighteningly is their love for learning. Schools in low-income communities often emphasize good behavior or classroom management over learning, asking teachers to spend more time building out their classroom consequences than finding ways to make personal connections to kids. And so Promise Boys really exist in a world that's very similar, a world where inner city schools are grooming kids for one or two paths, prison or worker, a world where kids are often left without an advocate and often left to fend for themselves. And I know this world very well because I was one of those kids. And so set in my hometown of Washington, D.C., I see we got some Maryland folks here and a couple of Virginia folks, so DMV, what's up? Set in my hometown of Washington, D.C., Promise Boys centers in on Urban Promise Prep, an all-boy charter school with claims to turn the roughest, toughest stones into the brightest diamonds. And this is all led by the no-nonsense authoritarian that is Principal Moore. But suddenly and tragically and violently, Principal Moore is killed in cold blood. And three boys from the school, JB, Trey, and Ramon, they all emerge as suspects in the crime, all with their own motives, all with their proximity to the crime location. And so what ensues is this winding mystery that uncovers the dark secrets about not only Promise Prep, but Principal Moore and our three suspects, ultimately illuminating in the true identity of our murderer. And I'm a huge fan of mystery. I grew up reading, anywhere from Scooby-Doo to Hardy Boys to Walter Mosley to Sidney Sheldon. And so I'm kind of a mystery buff. And so if you are a fan of mystery, particularly crime mystery, this is one that you're gonna love. But while the mystery is pulsing, the characters are even more dynamic. Again, these are kids that I grew up with, kids that I taught, kids that I coached in Little League football. JB, Trey, Ramon, these are all kids that we can empathize with, kids that we can understand, and certainly kids that we're gonna fall in love with when you read this book. So because of my experience working specifically with Black boys in DC, I see the extraordinary value in a story like Promise Boys, one that not only humanizes a population of kids commonly referred to as at risk, but this also calls out ways our current education system has created these what we call school to prison pipelines in inner city schools. So this book is for all the Black and brown kids of my hometown of Washington, D.C. and across the world that feel forgotten. I want them to know that they are not alone. I have not forgotten you, and that I will continue to do the work to tell your stories and hopefully inspire you as much as you've inspired me in my journey. And so again, I really want to thank you all. Promise Boys comes out in January of 2023, so at the top of the year. Of course, it can be pre-ordered now. I also ask that you tell a friend, post about it, find me on social media, and spread the word, because truly, a lot of my mission is start beginning to tell the story of our kids and letting people know some of the things that they go through in these schools, and really try to affect change. Start a conversation around how does it look to educate Black and brown kids in inner city schools and low income communities, and how it needs to change. And so while this book is fun, it's exciting, it's thrilling, it has a lot of heart. There's a lot of themes here, and it's an important one. So again, I really thank Macmillan. I thank you all for having me, and for giving me the space to share not only my story, but the story of, again, the kids that I've come across in my life. And I really think that this will be a book that will inspire them to tell their own stories. And so again, I just want to thank you all. And that's my piece.
Thank you so much, Nick. That was amazing. I didn't think it possible, but I'm even more excited for Promise Boys after hearing you talk about it. Thank you so much again. And yes, Promise Boys hit shelves January 31st, 2023, another date to add to the calendars. Let's give one last virtual round of applause for both of our wonderful author keynotes, Nick Brooks and Jas Hammonds. Thank you both for taking the time out of your night to join us. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you had a good time in your breakout rooms. I am so excited to kick things off for the next portion of our event with our next two wonderful featured authors. The first is, excuse me, is Aiden Thomas. Aiden is a trans Latinx New York Times bestselling author with an MFA in creative writing from Mills College. Originally from Oakland, California, they now make their home in Portland, Oregon. Aiden is notorious for not being able to guess the endings of books and movies, and organizes their bookshelves by color. Their books include Cemetery Boys, Lost in the Neverwoods, and the upcoming YA fantasy, The Sunbearer Trials, which hits shelves on September 6th. So soon.
So soon.
Aiden, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be talking to y'all. I forgot that my book was out in a month on August 6th. I didn't even say anything about it. So that's where I'm at mentally. But yeah, I'm really excited to talk with everybody. This is fun. This is the coolest.
That's what we're here for. We're here to plug your book and help you out.
Thank you.
But Aiden, you are not alone. You are joined tonight by the wonderful Joan He. Joan was born and raised in Philadelphia, but still on occasion loses her way. At a young age, she received classical instruction in oil painting before discovering that stories were her favorite kind of art. She studied psychology and Chinese history at the University of Pennsylvania and currently writes from a desk overlooking the city waterfront. She is the New York Times bestselling author of The Ones We're Meant to Find and Descendant of the Crane, her young adult debut novel, which comes out in paperback this September. Her next book, Strike the Zither, because just one book wasn't enough for Joan this season, she had to do two, hits shelves on October 25th. Joan, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm so excited to be here with everyone and Aiden.
We're so excited for you to join us. So thank you everyone who submitted questions in advance for Joan and Aiden to answer. We had so many good ones. It was very hard to choose. We're going to try to get to as many as we can. But first, for anyone in the room who may not be familiar with your upcoming releases, could the two of you just give us a quick elevator pitch for your upcoming books? And Aiden, I'm going to start with you.
The elevator pitches are so hard. I don't know what my books are about. I feel like I just nailed the Cemetery Boys one. But the Sunbearer Trials, I pitched it as Hunger Games meets Mexican Percy Jackson. And it is about, it's a secondary world fantasy called Reino del Sol. And it is about 10 demigods who are chosen every 10 years to compete in the Sunbearer Trials. And the winner is given this really high title of Sunbearer, and they help refuel the sun for another 10 years so that the world can continue going. Yeah, I'm really good at this. And the loser of those trials actually becomes a sacrifice in order to refill the suns. And the main character is Teo, who is a kind of a lower class demigod who's a jade, and they never get selected to compete in the Sunbearer Trials. But this year, 2 of them are chosen, one of them being Teo and another one being Zio, who is a 13-year-old boy who is the son of bad luck, and Teo is the son of the goddess of birds. So he has these big, beautiful quetzal wings. So it's about them kind of bonding together and figuring out how to survive the trials.
I love it. Sounds amazing. Everyone add it to your TBRs if it's not already. Joan, what about you?
I'm not much better at elevator pitches, but yeah, Strike the Zither is a fantasy that is a reimagined Three Kingdoms, which is a novelization based on a real period of Chinese history, and it follows the main strategist, whose name is Zephyr. She is the strategist for like the most underdog of the warlordesses, and there are 3 in all who are trying to fight over the continent, and Zephyr has to help her warlordess defeat the others despite having fewer resources and just being down in the dumps in general.
Thank you so much, Joan. You guys both have such like, I've never heard a plot like even remotely close to either ones that you guys have. It's just so original and outside of the box and truly not like anything I've ever seen in the fantasy genre before. So I'm curious, what was the spark of the idea? Where did the inspiration behind your stories come from? And since Aiden, you went first last time, I'm going to start with you, Joan.
Okay, so I guess, I mean, it's inspired, I mean, the initial inspiration, it just came from like my background knowledge of the Three Kingdoms. I'd always been told those stories growing up from my parents, even if I hadn't read the text at the time. And I guess just a lot of the older sea dramas, such as Shui Hu or Water Margin or Kangxi Dadi, which is like, it follows when the Qing Dynasty emperor's like ascendancy. So like these dramas, they're often like 80 something episodes, like filled with old men and like heroes and warriors. But like, I think just like the flavor of them really inspired this story. And a particular scene actually from the movie Red Cliff, which is also based on Three Kingdoms, that inspired the title and like, I guess just like the heart of the story, where 2 of the strategists are playing zithers to each other, but like communicating a lot of big brain thoughts somehow through their music.
I love it. I know I definitely like got very cinematic vibes as I was reading. So I can feel the influences of the sea dramas in it. Aiden, what about you?
There were a few different things. I think the main one, and probably the obvious one, is when I grew up, I loved, I mean, as did most of us, I loved the Percy Jackson series so much. But it was hard for me to see a place where I like fit into that. Like I always thought it would be really cool if I like secretly had a godly parent, and like who would that be? And so I was kind of thinking about that, and I was like, okay, if I was writing a book like this, what would I want it to look like? And so I decided it would be really fun and hard, as it turns out, to come up with like a whole pantheon of gods that were just kind of inspired by my culture. So like the goddess of birds is Quetzal. So those are which are my favorite birds in general, and they're beautiful. And so I have like a god of bad luck who's called Mala Suerte. I have a goddess of the hearth, and her name is Pan Dulce, because it's like our sweet bread is like where that like warmth and love of community comes from. And so it was just like a really fun way to kind of like show off. And it's been a really fun thing to do. And like another like big inspiration behind it was I wanted to push back against the idea of like American exceptionalism and being like the chosen one is the important one and they will fix everything. And I wanted to kind of switch it to more like, what does community intervention look like? And like, if we are blindly following the higher powers that be, how does that actually impact our communities? So that's a larger larger theme that I really wanted to tackle. And it's been really hard, but really exciting to write.
Yeah, and speaking of kind of, you know, the inspiration and thinking about something, I really like this question that we got in that someone says, I'm a firm believer that every story teaches its writer something new. So what did your latest books teach the two of you? Aiden, do you want to start this time?
Yeah, I had to learn so much. I was very ignorant because I was just like, high fantasy, how hard could it be? And it turns out it's really hard, especially if you're like, I'm going to create a whole polytheistic system. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. So I actually watched the Green Brothers have a series on YouTube called Crash Course, and they had a whole mythology one. And I think it was like 34 videos. So I just like crash watched all of them, and they taught me how to do it. Like I learned that in a pantheon, you have to choose what the gods are because the gods represent what's important to that community. So I had to sit there and be like, okay, what is important to this world that I'm writing about? And also figuring out like creation myths. I think that was the most difficult and exciting. And I looked at a bunch of different kind of religious texts and read different creation myths. And that was really fun because it was kind of like, I was learning about a lot of different cultures while also trying to embody my culture in this brand new pantheon and like world of gods. And yeah, it was really fun. It was great, but a lot of learning.
Joan, what about you?
I guess for me, I like this story really just taught me how to have fun because like even though it's like a war book, I feel like it's probably the least serious of my books. I feel like the ones we're meant to find was like about climate change, which is like super like pressing, especially in our current society. And Descendant, even though it was a fantasy, it was, I guess, very rooted in like father-daughter angst feelings. Whereas this Strike the Zither is more of like my form of escapism, even if that's very bloody and violent. I don't know what that says about me, but yeah, just like not worrying too much about trying to appeal to the mainstream, I think, for Strike the Zither in particular, and just like filling it with as many of my favorite things as possible, and just really writing it for me was something that I know sounds like easy, but I think after a while, like in this industry and stuff, it's something you have to relearn and remember. So that was probably what I learned.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. And for the both of you, it was your first time writing a series, which I think is just a new learning experience in and of itself, I would imagine. How was it different from writing your past books?
Joan, you go first.
I mean, for one, just like the timeline pressure, whether it's real or imagined, because I like previously I've written standalone, so it's like okay if you know there's a gap in between. But I definitely think like as a reader, I feel like okay, I don't want to keep my readers waiting too long for the sequel. So just being a slow writer, I think just managing that and that like anxiety. Other than that, it's funny because when I first drafted Strike, I actually envisioned it as like a 600, 700 page like one tome chunk, which now like I'm like okay, like thank God I decided to split it for like production etc reasons, but I guess that kind of changed. That made it a little bit easier in the sense that even though I was for the first time writing a series, I kind of had already known what the second half of the story would be. So for me, it would probably just be the time expectations.
Yeah, I agree. It's a lot of pressure, and again, this was not only am I writing a high fantasy, I'm writing a series, and that's tricky. So it was a lot of learning and being like, oh gosh, what does this even look like? I think we had really similar experiences, Joan. And I especially get hung up and frustrated because it's like when you have a standalone, you write it and you know what, that is what it is. It's off in the world. But now like with a sequel, I have to remember everything that happened in the first book. And then sometimes I come up with ideas for the second book and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go back and like change that in Sunbearer, but I can't because they're picking them already. And that feels rude. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, this would be really cool, but I can't go back and fix it and like change things in the first book.
Yeah, definitely. New source of angst, I feel like, on top of all the other writing angst.
Totally, exactly.
You both need like an addendums page on your website.
Yeah.
Things that I will change about book one.
Pretend this is actually what happened.
I told the two of you that I was going to ask this question. This might be my favorite question that we got in. If you had to describe your book in the form of a food or a drink, what would it be and why?
That one's very easy for me, and it's going to be a candy. And those are the De La Rosa Mazapan roses. I mean, they're not roses, but there's like a rose on the label. If you've read Sunbearer, there's a sweet moment between the main character and his rival slash express friend, and it kind of circles around that. But I can't give any context because of spoilers. But yeah, it's definitely those marzipan. Those, I'm obsessed with them. They're delicious.
Now I want to try one of them.
They're really good. But the whole thing is that like when you open it, it's marzipan, so it's like peanut butter or peanuts rather, like ground up, and so they break really easily. And so the whole thing is that when you get one, you have to try to open it like really carefully so it doesn't fall apart, and it's mostly impossible.
It's okay. I'll just eat like the falling apart crumbs.
Yeah, it's fine. It's still great.
I guess for me, Strike the Zither is probably most like a moon cake in that like there's a surprise center. I mean, I feel like that's the case with all my books. Like you think it's sweet and then you get to the center and there's just this salty duck yolk egg in the middle.
I love both of those now. I feel like I need dessert immediately. The two of you are making me hungry with this conversation. Aiden, we had someone that wrote in that said that they just finished the Sunbearer Trials a few days ago and adored it, especially as a non-binary person. They really appreciated the representation included, especially with Soul and Ocello. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. They were wondering if we will get confirmation or elaboration on Zio's gender in book 2.
Yeah, so a really cool thing about the Sunbearer Trials is like when I got to make this world of gods, I got to decide what they looked like, and I decided they were all queer and all gendered queer. So the omniscient sun god, his name's Soul, their name's Soul, excuse me, is non-binary, and Ocello is also binary and not binary, excuse me, I say binary. And then Zio, who is that underdog who's kind of teaming up with Teo, at the start of Sunbearer, he identifies as being a trans boy, and throughout it he kind of starts questioning it and isn't quite sure, and that's definitely something that's going to be further explored in book 2, but I can't tell you within what context so that there's no spoilers, because it's actually kind of plot relevant. If you've read the end of, well, actually you've read the end of Sunbearer, so you know why. So yes, it is going to be explored, and I think that was one of my favorite parts about writing this series, is that I just got to like create all the queer and like trans characters that I wanted, and that was really fun. Like we have 10 main competitors in the book, and 4 of them are under the trans umbrella, so that was really exciting.
That's awesome. And you know, another thing about series is you have spoilers. You have to worry about spoilers. It doesn't just end at the end.
It's hard.
I'm curious, and I think this might tie in a little bit to what you're just saying, Aiden. For the two of you, what is the thing you feel most motivates you when you are writing your novels?
You go first, Jem.
Okay. I mean, I feel like that answer for me has changed as I've written. In the beginning, like before I published it, really was because I started in fan fiction, so it was like trying to find those readers and like writing for them and like writing for the joy of like, you know, getting the reader reaction, being like, oh my God, I loved your work, etc. But I feel like now really what motivates me is just like writing for myself and like trying to like take the vision I have in my brain and create something that I would really like to read. And I feel like that just grows more and more important, because like there's lots of ups and downs, but as long as you're writing something that fulfills yourself, that's the most important to me, at least.
Yeah, I think for me, one thing that I do for myself when I'm feeling like down, especially about like my writing, and I'm like, I'm actually not good at this, as it turns out. I don't have my Twitter DMs open because I get a lot of harassment and stuff like that. But on Instagram, I say that I don't check my DMs, but I do go through my message requests, and I get a lot of messages from readers, bloggers, and stuff like that, just like saying how important one of the books that I wrote was to them. And I'll actually take a screenshot. Like I usually don't reply because I don't want to suddenly have people think that they can access me through my DM requests, but I'll take a screenshot and I save them in a folder on my phone that's just a heart emoji. And when I'm feeling like really down about myself, I'll go through and read those really kind messages. And sometimes I'll even like go back to that person and message them and be like, I know you messaged me like 6 months ago, but I just wanted to let you know that I was like having a hard day, and that was actually really helpful, and like thank you so much. Yeah, and I think that's a good motivator for me.
I love that. That's such a good idea. All right, we're running out of time, but I want to get to as many of these as we can. So we're going to do a lightning round.
Okay.
1 or 2 word answers only, no breaking the rules because we have to get through these.
Okay.
What is your favorite writing snack, Joan?
Coffee.
Aiden?
A Twizzler straw and a Red Bull. Or sorry, a
Okay.
red vine straw and a Red Bull, and it's
We're
disgusting.
so caffeinated.
I'm
Yeah.
sensing a theme here.
We're awake.
If you could meet any of your characters, who would you want to meet? Aiden?
Nia from the Sunbearer Trials.
Meet or be?
Meet.
Hero from The Ones We're Meant to Find.
Nice. Would you ever revisit the world of your previous books and write something else in the same universe? Yes or no answer?
No, no.
Yes, I'm writing a Cemetery Boys sequel. I didn't think it would happen, but it is. So, yay!
Insert thunderous applause here. What are you currently reading and loving?
What arc did I just finished? Well, Dauntless just came out, which is a Filipino-inspired high fantasy, and it's sapphic, and it's incredible. If you haven't read it, Dauntless, it just came out like a couple of weeks ago. It's really good. I love it.
This is a bit cheap, but I'm reading my friend June Tan, who wrote J Fire Gold. I'm reading her unannounced, as of yet unannounced book.
I'm so jealous.
Jonah's teasing us with her author sway over here. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have tonight. I wish we had a couple more hours because I truly could just listen to the 2 of you chat about your books all night. But unfortunately, we have to get on with the rest of our program. But Joan and Aiden, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It was so great to hear from the 2 of you. As a reminder, Strike the Zither comes out this October, and the Sunbearer Trials is on sale in just a couple of weeks. Joan and Aiden, thank you both.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you guys.